Good afternoon, esteemed traders and investors. Today is Thursday, November 20th. I present to your attention another market review for Forex. As always, I'm glad to be here with you today. So what do we have in the news? Today is Thursday, and today there are unusual news releases for the dollar in the United States of America. As they say, unemployment claims, initial claims, all of this will be released at the exact same second, and then the continuing claims will come out. Even for the continuing claims, on Friday we don't have any major news for the dollar, except, by the way, for the PMI at 5:45 p.m. So today is going to be interesting. Let's take a look at what we can trade on the charts. Let's go. So, before the most important news, which we haven't had for quite a while, in other words, non-farm payrolls, my friends, should have been released in the first half of the month, or even the week, that is, on the first Friday. But now they're coming out on the 20th due to shutdowns, or as some say, shutdowns. So, everyone is waiting to see what will come out, but I still stick to the opinion that everyone already knows what will be released. Or rather, not everyone, but only those who need to know. They already know and have already positioned themselves. As for gold, my friends, gold is entering a triangle pattern. Where will it break out? Of course, it's unclear. The thing is, the bullish break has held, and today gold is testing the area of the second bullish break from below. Those who trade between the breaks have already made money today, both during the Asian session and in Europe, where we tested the bullish break zone. In other words, the instrument is being squeezed into a triangle, which isn't great, and it's not very clear where it will break out. But from the perspective of stop hunting, there's plenty of money both above and below. In this situation, either you are trading between the breaks and are already at break even, or, my friends, you are just food for the market. Let's move on to the euro dollar. This is an instrument that broke down out of its tight triangle and is now trading at the bottom. Basically, we definitely expected this move. It's perfectly logical, but the zone for making the long trades is a bit below the current quotes at the level of 1.14977. We haven't reached this bounce zone yet, but here you can catch a rebound, at least 1-to-1. If the instrument drops down here with a stop at 270 and a target of around 300, that's quite possible. This scenario could play out, including today, due to volatility from the news. The decline that happened, especially yesterday, was rather sluggish, meaning there weren't any clear obvious breakdowns here. One of the last ones is in this zone, but shorting from here would carry quite a lot of risk. But that could also happen. For example, one scenario is that we test the long breakdown zone, move to the short zone, and then there are different options. Either we keep falling further down or we start to rise. But these two moves, at the very least these two, can definitely be worked with. Looking for real trading advantages? Forex offers the lowest spreads and commissions. For major currency pairs, our conditions are more favorable, spreads are lower, and the commission is only $5 instead of $7. That's real savings for every trader. And now let's get back to our market overview. As for this instrument, the British pound USD pair also moved down yesterday and is currently, right now, testing the long breakdown zone. This instrument isn't as technical as the euro, but even with a stop, say, close to 400, you can also count on a 4-to-400 ratio, roughly in this area, which is exactly where the mirror level is. Basically, you can take a 1-to-1 here. The Australian dollar also experienced a significant drop yesterday, and last night it corrected a bit. What's important to note is that the instrument updated its lows yesterday in particular. The lows from last week and the week before were broken, meaning this bottom was breached. That was the first target for taking profits on shorts if you sold in this area. The move was almost 200 points, but in my opinion, these are not all the targets the instrument can reach. The second target should be the level at 0.64434, which is the low from mid-October, right here. And the third level is the low from August, which could also be reached if today the dollar weakens or strengthens on the US unemployment news. I also want to remind you that every Forex client automatically receives loss insurance. For every $1 of compensation, only $4 of your friend's investments are required. Just submit a request, and your losses will be recovered. Let's continue with the review. As for USD Canadian dollar, after such a false breakout, it moved up without testing the long breakdown zone and is now approaching the short zone. Here, you could also take a rebound if you are focused on a decline for this instrument, but in the current zone, the instrument is not interesting. It might be thrown down, and you should be ready for that because the range here is USD Japanese yen, after a really powerful breakout upwards, is experiencing a short correction today. I think this is also related to the news. The trend is just incredible. It's a mega bullish instrument. By the way, it entered the short breakdown zone and is correcting from there. This particular event actually happened back in the month of January. In fact, what we are doing right now is testing and analyzing the detailed breakdown for January of this year. For the time being, I'm not taking any action here. I need to have some solid, well-founded reasons to sell before making any decisions. There are targets below, but it's possible there will be another high, and it might be worth looking for selling opportunities because everyone selling now will be stopped out above the year's high. As for oil, yesterday it made a strong move, wiping out the area at the breakdown, and those who set their stops correctly are now in profit. Those who want to save on stops can work from the current prices in a long position, with a stop below the current week's low and a take profit at 62.93. So basically $63 in this zone. In this zone, we could very well correct downward after the breakout, and from the current prices, you can set your stop here, meaning if they give a correction on oil to around the 59.28 level, then you can take this part upward. Accordingly, with a stop of about 0.50, you can catch a move of 350, which I think is pretty good in the current situation. With InstaForex, you can triple your profit. For every $4 of your friend's investments, you automatically get an extra $1 added to your profit with no extra conditions. As for Bitcoin, friends, Bitcoin worked out the long breakdown zone very technically on the weekly time frame at the 88,522 level. Let's take a look. A perfect test right at the touch. For those who had limit orders set, they did pretty well here. A perfect test and a sharp rebound. I'm not saying that a really powerful move could happen here, but we did consider this scenario, and a move from here could happen. Buying at 88,000 in hopes of at least reaching 100,000 is quite a realistic scenario for this volatile instrument. The American stock market, S&P 500, Nasdaq all have gone into correction. Let me remind you that there are still some rather interesting zones everywhere. If today there is currently a strengthening of the US dollar, which I am expecting to continue through the major currency pairs. If this strengthening trend persists, then the stock market will also collapse, and we will see a powerful move as these quotes crash, breaking through the weekly lows and making a strong move downward. I hope this can only happen if the US dollar continues to strengthen. Dollar franc, excellent. It moved away from the lows and is again pressing on its semi-annual highs. If today we get news that strengthens the dollar, we'll see a good breakout upward, taking out the 0.81759 level. I hope this happens. We also have a great offer. Fund your account and get a 30% tradable bonus. Trade with additional capital and expand your opportunities with InstaForex. As for the Canadian dollar franc, it's also showing growth. Let me remind you that there's a great plan for an upward move here, just like with the dollar franc. And you can play out a three-wave structure here, which is pretty easy to read. A breakout upward and a test of the long break right here. For those who didn't buy at the lows, unfortunately, such people exist, and I pointed out this zone where you could have bought in with a very tight stop since the lows weren't broken, and now we're gradually seeing upward movement. I think the value is negligible because the sellers who are positioned above the weekly highs will most likely be taken out. Next, we have the grid trading method. Australian dollar, Canadian dollar is lagging in the range. I'm interested in selling from the higher points, and the step is 500 pips per year. Trade with InstaForex, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for new market reviews.